What's going on, everyone? My name is Hunter, and welcome to the third episode of the SvelteKit and PocketBase series. In this video, we're going to be adding user account and security settings to our application. The account settings are going to give our users the ability to change their email and username, and then the security settings will allow our users to change their password. We're going to start off with our security page.svelte. So let's open that up and let's go ahead and set up some initial structure for this page. So we're going to set up a flex column with full, height full, and space Y12. And we're going to start off with the change email section, right? So we'll have a div, and then we'll have a heading that says change email, and then a divider. And then what we're actually going to create is we're going to create a modal. So essentially the user will be able to click a button that says change email, and then it will change that user's email. And the reason for us doing this, if we go to our PocketBase instance that's running at localhost 8090, and we sign in with our account, if we go to our users collection and we click on API preview, you'll see that if we go to view a user, for example, right, you will see that there is an email visibility property, and that is set to false by default. And we want it to be false because if we ever have other users within our application, they would have the ability to see the emails of other users, right? And we want to protect that. So we're going to leave this to false so that our email will not be displayed inside of our profile itself. The usernames are going to be our public facing fields. So we have to we're going to set up a modal that's essentially going to allow the user to open up a modal where it'll have a form to change their email. And then we'll do the same thing for the username. So since we're going to do the same thing for both email and username, it's probably best that we turn this into a component. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to go into our lib components, and we're going to create a new component, and we'll call it modal.svelte. So we're going to set this modal up to be able to be used by other parts of our application as well if we'd like to. So let's first set up a script tag. We're going to export let label, and then we're going to export let checked, right? And these are going to be two props that we're going to take in. You can extend this if you'd like. The first thing we're going to set up is a label, and it's going to be for, and we're going to pass the label that we passed in the prop. And then we're going to have a slot, and the slot's name is going to be trigger. And if you're not familiar with how these slots work, I will demonstrate that in just a second. So the slot's name is going to be trigger, and then we're going to have an input. It's going to be a type of checkbox. The ID is going to be equal to label. The class is going to be equal to modal-toggle, and this is a Daisy UI class. And then we'll set checked here. And then we'll open up another label tag. It's also going to be for that label. It's going to have a class of modal bottom, and then small modal middle. This basically is what this is going to do is it's going to, if the screen size is bigger than small, or small or bigger, it's going to put the modal in the middle of the screen. And if it's less than small, so if it's on a mobile device, it's going to be at the bottom, and it looks really nice. So then we'll open that up, and we're going to have another label inside of this label. This for we can leave as empty, and the class is going to be modal box. Then we're going to set up a div with a font of bold, text XL, and text center. And this is going to be our heading slot. So we'll add a slot here with a name of heading, and then we'll set up another div with a class of margin Y2, and this is just going to be a slot tag. And then one last div here that we're going to set up is just going to be another slot, and it's going to be modal action.justify center, and then this is going to be slot name equals actions. So what this will allow us to do is we have this component now, right? We can wrap other components or other elements or divs or buttons that we define in this modal component. And then we can add things in a specific areas with the slot name. So if we want something to go inside of here, we add the slot name as trigger. And then as if we want something to go here, we add the slot name as heading. And we'll demonstrate that here in just a second when we get this set up. Okay, so now that that's saved, let's go into our index.js and actually export this so that we can use our nice inputs or exports that we set up. We'll save that, and then we'll come back into our page.svelte. We'll open up some script tags, and we'll import modal from lib/components. And we're also going to need input as well. So let's just go ahead and take that in as well. So now we can actually open up this modal, and it's going to have a label of change email. Checked is going to be equal to email modal open, which we actually need to define up here. So let's just say let email modal open, and we'll make this reactive. And we'll set it to false. We want email modal open to be false at first, right? And then we can close this tag. And then within this, we'll say span, and we'll say slot equals trigger, right? So this is going to go into this slot right here. So this space right here, this is where this is going to go. And this is going to be our button that basically opens up the modal, right? So we'll give it a class of button button primary, and then we'll give it a name of change email, and then we'll have an H3, and guess what? That's going into our heading slot. So we'll say H3, the slot is going to be heading, and since we already set up some default font classes here, some text classes, we don't have to pass anything else with this H3. However, we have the ability to override that if we'd like. So if we'd like to set a more specific class, a bigger heading, a smaller heading, we can do that here as well if we'd like to, but we don't need to here. So we'll say change your email, and then we'll set up a form. So the action is going to eventually be !/update email. The method is going to be post, and the class is going to be space y2. And then within this form, we're going to have an input. It's going to be our input component. The ID is going to be email. Type is also going to be email. Required is going to be equal to true. Value is going to be form.data.email, which we don't actually have just yet. So let's actually export let form. And then that should be good for right now with the input. And then we're also going to have a button. It's going to be a type of submit and a class of button primary, and width full. And we'll have this button say change my email. Okay, so now let's check this out. So if we go into our account settings here, oh, I apologize. I was editing the security settings the whole time. So let me actually copy or cut all of this out of here, go into profile or account, and add this here. So I apologize for that. So now you can see that we have this change email title at the top, and we have this button. So if we click on this button, you can see that we now have change your email is passed. And we actually need to pass in a label to our input. So let's go here and just say label equals new email, or enter your new email address. So now we get this nice pop-up modal that happens here, and we're able to enter our new email address in here and then trigger the form action from here. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up that form action now. So we'll need to create a new file inside of account called pluspage.server.js, and that's where our actions are going to go. And we'll say export const actions. We'll say update email. It's going to be asynchronous, and it's going to take in request and locals. We'll say data is equal to object.fromEntries await request.formData. And then we'll open up a try catch. And then for the try, what we're going to do is if we look at the PocketBase docs here, we can look at request email change. And essentially this just takes in an email address. And what it's going to do is it's going to send a confirmation to that new email address that the user enters, or that we input here, which in our case is going to be the email that the user enters. And it won't actually change their email until they confirm that new email address, right? So let's go ahead and set that up. So we can say await locals.pb.collection users.request email change, and we'll pass in data.email. And then we'll catch the error. So we'll say throw error. It'll say error.status and error.message. And then if everything is successful, we'll just return success is true for the time being, and then that should work. So let's go ahead and test that out by first ensuring that we have another validated email address within our Mailgun account. So I added a couple extra ones. So I'm going to be using irishuntabyte plus nala@gmail.com, but feel free to use any other email. Just make sure it is one that you have verified with Mailgun if you are still on the free tier. So let's go ahead and test this out by going into our application. We'll say change email, and we'll pass in a new email. Okay, so we didn't get any indication that it failed, right? So that means it most likely worked. So let's go into our inbox here, and we'll need to wait for that email to come. So it already came through. We can see that in my spam, it has confirm your new showcase email address. I can mark this as safe and then actually confirm the new email. And then it's going to have me put in my password to verify that this is actually my account. So let me just type my password in here. And when I click confirm, it says successfully changed the new email address. You can now sign in with your new address. So if we go back to showcase here, we're going to still be logged in, right? But if we go to log out, and I try to log in with irishuntabyte plus iris, which is the old email, we'll see that we have an error. Something went wrong logging in. And then we'll type in the new email address, and we're now logged back in as expected, right? So now let's work on actually updating the security or the username, right? So the username, we're gonna have to do a couple of things. We're gonna have to first check to make sure that the username does not already exist, right? Because we don't want the users to be able to try to change their name to something that already exists, because users' names are unique in our database. So let's go ahead and see how we can set that up. So going back into our page.svelte, we'll also want to set up another one of these. We'll say let username modal open, and we'll set that to false. And then we'll come down here underneath of this div and we'll do the same thing that we did above essentially, except we're going to have change your password, or I'm sorry, change your username. We're also going to have an input above that that's going to show the current username. So what we can do is we can set up a divider and then we can add an input. The ID is going to be username. The label will be username. The value is going to be equal to data.user.username, and it's going to be disabled. And then we actually need to accept the data prop. And that's going to come all the way from our layout, right? Because our layout, if you recall, our root layout is actually returning user as locals.user. So we'll have access to that here as well. And then we're going to need a modal. So let's just copy this modal here that we already used, and we'll just edit that a bit so we can save some time. So instead of saying checked email modal open, this will actually be username modal open. And the label will be change username. The trigger will say change username, change your username, and then we can update these fields. So this will be update username, type will be text, and then enter your new username. And we actually won't, well, I guess we can do this here. We can have the value as form data.username for the time being, and required is going to be true. The button will say change my username. So now when we look at this, we can see that we actually forgot the header. So let's take that from here and put this underneath of the, or above the divider. We'll say change username. Okay, and there's a bit of extra space underneath the divider or above the input. So let's just knock the divider's margin down a bit so it looks a little bit more consistent. So now we can see that we have a button that says change username. We open it, we now get a new form that says enter your new username. And this is where we can have the users enter their username that they would like to change their username to. So now let's go and set up the action to actually make this magic happen. So we'll set up a new action, and it's going to be called update username. It's going to take in request and locals. And then we're going to get the form data object, of course. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set up a try catch first, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to try to find a user with the username that matches whatever the user passed into that form. And what that's going to do is it's going to throw a 404 error if there isn't one found. So if a user isn't found, then we're going to throw a 404. So we can take advantage by catching that 404 and then actually updating the user's email address. So we'll say await locals.pb.collection, and we'll say users.get first list item. And if we look at the PocketBase documentation, we could say list and search, and then we can fetch only the first record that matches the specified filter. So basically we just want to get the first one. And then we're going to pass in a filter, right? Using PocketBase's filter syntax. And if you're not familiar with how that looks, you can actually go through the PocketBase documentation and they have the filter syntax there that you can use. But I'm going to show you how to do this really quick. So we're going to put some backticks and we're going to say username equals. Now we need to wrap this in quotes again. And we'll open up some brackets here with the $, and we'll say data.username. And data.username is the username that the user passed in. So we're looking for the first list item out of users that matches this username. Okay. And then if it doesn't find something, it's going to throw a 404, right? So what we can do is we can say catch error, and then we can say if error.status equals 404, then what we want to do is we're going to set up another try catch, and we'll say const username is equal to await locals.pb.collection. We're going to go to the users collection .update. And now we need to pass in the ID of the user that we're looking to update. In that case, ours is available with locals. So locals.user.id. And then we can just say username, data.username. And then what we need to do is we actually need to set the locals.user.username to the updated username if it's successful, of course, because as we learned in the previous video, the hooks will not run before the load functions run again. So we'll say locals.user.username equals username. And again, this line, it won't even get to this line if this does not actually update. So therefore we're safe to set this here, right? And then what we'll do is we'll return success is true if that works. And then we need to catch this error as well. And we can just say console log error, and then we'll throw an error of 400, and we'll say something went wrong changing your username, because that's probably a validation error at that point. And then if the error.status does not equal 404, then what we'll do is we will console log the error, and we'll throw an error of error.status error.message. And I guess we could also throw that here, error.status and then error.message. And we'll be able to update these with more descriptive values later on. And I think that should be everything that we need to do here. We're returning if it's good. If not, we're throwing. Okay, cool. And this error does come from SvelteJS/kit. All right, cool. So now let's test this out. So let's go back into our application here and let's attempt to change the username. So I'm going to change it from the irisjcff10 to iris, just iris, right? So I click change my username. We can see that our fields instantly updated. And then if we go to our collections in PocketBase, we can see that the username was also updated here as well. So that does in fact work. Awesome. So now that both of those functionalities are working, we can actually move on to our security page.svelte now. And this is where we're going to give the users the ability to change their password without having to go through the reset password process. So we'll just set up the structure at first, of course. And we're going to start up a form, and the action is going to be eventually update password. The method is going to be post, and the class will be flex call, space y2, and then width full. And then within this form, we're going to have an h3, a divider, and then a few inputs. So let's go ahead and set those up. The first input is going to have an ID of old password, a label of old password, and I'll show you why we're calling it old password here in a second. It's going to be a type of password, and it's going to be required. And then we can just copy this down a few more times. This one is going to be password confirm. The label will be password, or we'll say new password for the label, and then confirm new password here, so we're not being confusing. And then we actually need to import label at the top. So let's open up some script tags and say import input from lib/components. And then we're going to have an A tag, which is going to allow the user just to reset their password. If they, for some reason, forgot their old password, we'll send them a link as they would normally do if they were attempting to log in. So we'll set up an A tag. The href is going to be to reset password. And then the class is going to be text primary hover. And we'll say I forgot my password. And then we'll just set up the button. Okay, so now that we have this set up, let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like in our application. So if we go to the security page now, we can see that we're getting an internal error, and that is because I did an incorrect import statement at the top. So we need to make sure that is actually wrapped in brackets. And now we can see our change password page, which looks pretty nice. We can enter our old password and our new password and confirm new password. So the reason I'm doing an old password and then the new passwords is because if we come into the documentation here and we do a confirm or an update, I apologize, we can see that we can take in a password confirm, and an old password, right? So old password is the old auth record password. This field is required only when changing the record password. Admins and auth records with managed access can skip this field. So we want the users to enter their old password, and then we're going to update it with the new ones, okay? So now let's set up the action. So we can create a new page inside of security called pluspage.server.js, and it's going to have our actions. And we'll set up the update password action first. It's going to take in request and locals. And then we'll set data to object.fromEntries await request.formData. And then we'll open up a try catch block where we're going to try to update the user and change their password. So we'll say await locals.pb.collection users.update. And we want to set this to the locals.user.id. And then data, we're just going to pass the entire object in. It's going to have the old password, and password confirm. And then what we want to do is, if this is successful, we want to actually log the user out so they can log back in with their new information, and our cookie gets updated and all of the records get updated and synchronized. Okay, so we can say locals.pb.authstore.clear. So that'll force the user to log out, be logged out, which will then end up redirecting them to the home page or to the login page. We'll console log error, and we'll throw an error from SvelteJS/kit called error.status and error.message. And then if everything works, we'll just throw a redirect to the login page. And then this redirect is actually also going to come from SvelteJS/kit, not that runtime that it keeps trying to import it from. Okay, so this should work. So let's test this out. So right now my password, I believe, is set to password. So I'm going to change it to password123 and see if that works. So this password is going to have password here. And then we'll do password123 and password123. So now when I click update password, we'll see that we were taken to the login page, right? And then I'm going to try to log in again. Remember, I changed the email address. I have to remember that. And then I'm going to log in with password 123. And we can see that we're now logged back in. And then I'm able to change that back if I would like to. Okay, awesome. So all the functionality is there, but let's actually go ahead and add some progressive enhancement to these forms like we've been doing in the previous videos. And we'll start off with the settings and account page. So we'll come up here in our script tag and we'll create two new use enhanced functions that we're going to pass into our forms. The first one is going to be for updating the email, and the second one is going to be for updating the username. So actually first, let's just let loading up here at the top. And again, similar to how we did with the previous fields that we actually progressively enhanced, we're going to be able to disable those inputs while we are submitting the form. So we can say const submit update email. And then we're going to set loading to true. And we're also going to set email modal open to true. We're going to return async, and we're going to have the result here. And then we're going to say switch result.type. Case is going to be success. We'll say await invalidate all, which we're going to need to import. And then while we're here, we'll go ahead and import enhance and apply action from app/forms. Okay, so now that we've awaited the invalidation, what we're going to do is we're going to set email modal open to false. And this will close that modal, right? So as soon as the form is submitted, it'll just close the modal and then we'll break. And then we'll have a case of error. And the reason I'm putting these here as placeholders for now, and I'm just breaking out of them, is because we're going to do something with these here in the future, and it's nice to have them in place. And then we'll set the default to await, apply action, result. And then outside of this switch and within the return, we want to set loading to false. So basically now that everything is done, we're done loading. And then what we can do is for these email inputs, we can actually set them to disabled will be equal to loading. So for here, we can say disabled equals loading. And then the same thing for this button. Now we need to come down to our form and say use enhance and then pass in our submit update email function. Okay, so let's check out and see how this works. So if we go to account, now we go to change email, the modal still opens as expected. And then if I change the email back to something else and I click change my email, we'll see that it was disabled while it was loading, and then it eventually closed. So now there's probably a confirmation email in my inbox here, or there will be in just a few seconds, to confirm the new email address, as you can see. So that did in fact still work. It was much cleaner. We didn't require a page reset or anything of that sort. So now let's do the same thing for the username field. So let's go back into our page here and we'll say const update, submit update username. And we can just take all of this here and just copy it down. And then we can set loading to true. We'll change this to username modal open. I believe is what it's called, username modal open. Do the same thing here. And then everything else will be the same for this specific form as well. So now we can just simply come down to our other form. We'll set use enhance to submit update username. And then we'll also set up disabled on these as well. And then now this should work the exact same way. So let's go back into our application. We'll go to change username, and I'll change the username to Iris123. And I'll click change my username. And we can see that the username was changed. And then if we come back into our collections here and we refresh, we'll see that the username was changed here as well. Awesome. So I think that's going to conclude this specific video where we finished up the settings. In the next video, we're going to keep moving forward with the application. We're going to start to implement some form validation, some toasts here to kind of clean this piece up, because I really want this piece to be kind of the staple of your application moving forward so that you understand how to progressively enhance forms, use form actions, interact with PocketBase, as well as potentially showing some toast notifications and toast messages when things go wrong. So all that's coming up in this series. So I'm looking forward to the next episode, and I will see you all then.